Nvidia stock investors are pretty excited for the market to open tomorrow as the stock is up nearly 2.8% overnight after we did get some amazing bullish news about the trade discussions happening with China and the United States over the past weekend. So obviously this is great news for most of the market, but obviously you guys know me. I focus more on the tech space, and I just want to share my overall thoughts on how I see this as a tech, AI, and semiconductor investor. So let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so first, I just want to kind of look at maybe some popular semiconductor stocks right now. We can see Nvidia is up about 2.8% overnight. Now, quick caveat, this is using Robinhood's overnight trading, and there is very low volume. Now, what I'm really looking is just more the overall sentiment, right? I'm not saying the stocks are going to open up at these levels, but right now, the overnight sentiment is pretty bullish for Nvidia. And then if we take a closer look at maybe some other companies, AMD is up about 2.7%. We can also probably look at Micron Technology up about 2.5%. Let's even look at companies like Broadcom up about 3%. Now, I'm kind of curious to see how the big tech players are doing. Google is up about 1.3%. Let's look at Microsoft right now, up about 1%. So we can see that it definitely has a little bit more excitement right now, focused on the semiconductor space, as I do believe a lot of these tariffs discussions was going to create maybe more of a major short-term headwind on consumer electronics. And obviously in consumer electronics, a big loser in that space was going to be the semiconductor market. Now, again, I thought about that more of short-term pain as a long-term investor. It doesn't really affect how I own and share my overall stock. So I still was overall bullish for this market, but I understood that in the short term, a lot could happen. Now, there hasn't been nothing 100% confirmed, but we're going to hear what we're seeing. And I do believe what we're seeing right now is very bullish. Just maybe let's kind of look at some other popular companies really quick. Palantir's up about 2.5%. And I believe the overall futures right now, if we go to maybe CNBC, we can see that the futures for the Dow is up about 1%. The S&P 500 is up about 1.2%. And we can see the NASDAQ, which is a lot of tech heavy, is up about 1.7%, almost 2%. So again, remember, that's a whole bunch of companies. Now your kind of favorite tech space, semiconductor space, are probably covering or carrying the brunt of this. And that's why we saw maybe more semiconductor stocks up in the 3% range, opposed to some of the some other big tech players, right? So overall, I am actually very excited about the market. Now, obviously, a lot of things can change overnight, but as of right now. Oh, also, I forgot to say Happy Mother's Day. And if you're watching this, hopefully you guys had a great time with your family. Hope you got plenty of gifts or just family time with your mom or your wife, the mother of your child. So happy Mother's Day to everybody, and hope everybody's having a great time. Now, tomorrow, again, seems like it's going to be great. But again, anything can change overnight. Now, we did get, for those that are not familiar, this past weekend, there was going to be in the Swiss government hosted kind of discussion between the United States and Chinese officials. And we saw the Secretary of Treasury being there, and the U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador being there, and their counterpart Chinese player. So these are the words that the Secretary of Treasury, Scott, mentioned, that he's happy to report that they've made substantial progress between the United States and China, and in the very important trade talks. First, he wants to thank, obviously, the Swiss government, the Swiss host, as they were very kind in providing them with a wonderful venue. And I think that led to a great deal of productivity we've seen. Obviously, when you're kind of discussing two different parties, you don't want to go to either home party's base. You want to go somewhere neutral because it kind of does reduce the tension a little bit. So obviously, pretty smart move by going to a venue over there hosted by the Swiss government. Now, they will be giving details tomorrow on Monday. We don't actually have a real time, and if they do give us a time, usually it's a little bit late, but they can tell you that the talks were productive, and they kind of talked about who was involved from the China and the US. But overall, very great productive talks. Now, the U.S. Trade Representative mentioned that this was, as the secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement. So we're seeing some form of agreement is coming, which reflect that perhaps the differences were not so large as maybe thought. That being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days. Just remember why we're here in the first place. The United States has a massive 1.2 trillion trade deficit, so the president declared a national emergency and imposed tariffs. And we're confident that the deal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us to work toward resolving that national emergency. And usually, when we have been hearing kind of these talks between the United States and China, it's always kind of like a one-sided. And by one-sided, I mean that we usually hear, "Hey, look, the U.S. said something," and then Chinese and counterparts or the Chinese government would say, technically, that's not what we said. We said something more along these lines, or vice versa. The Chinese counterparts would say something, and then the U.S. would be like, not necessarily true. But if we kind of look at reports happening, it does seem like the Chinese counterparts to the vice premier who led the delegations of Chinese officials told reporters on Sunday that the meeting achieved substantial progress and reached important consensus. So I think this is what the market is very excited. Both parties, even though we have no actual deals at the moment, both parties have said exclusively that it was a very constructive and that they worked really well on achieving some substantial progress and reaching important consensus. So I think the market is very, very excited about that because there's obviously still uncertainty of what the trade deal is there. But at least now we're getting from both parties, from both parties, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think this is what is happening right now is the market is saying, look, it's not necessarily as bad as we thought it was going to be. And it could go a little bit longer from here, but at least we see some hope in this trade deals. And obviously that is to go, in my opinion, very, very bullish for the semiconductor space. As like I mentioned, I do believe a lot of this was going to take some major hits in things like consumer electronics, which definitely drives the semiconductor market because a lot of things get manufactured for the consumer electronic space outside of the United States. Now, I am going to be curious, and this is something we are going to focus a lot during this channel for the upcoming week, as we do have to see what the overall consensus is. And I'm going to share my overall thoughts as a semiconductor investor in the future as well. Now, there are some other things to kind of keep in mind of, not this week, but next week, starting next Monday, we do have Computex. And I'll probably do another episode about this later next week as we get closer to it. But on May 19th, on Monday, we do have Computex, which is going to be a great space for semiconductor consumer tech and just kind of overall AI tech right now happening, robotics, and the list goes on and on. So if you are a semiconductor investor, you are going to want to follow the May 19th. Now, I want to say the market is going to continue to be very, very volatile. As if you go to the Truth Social platform, there have been a lot of things that President Trump has kind of talked about in just the past 24 hours or so. Some dealing with things like the pharmaceutical market, the prescription drug market. Normally, I don't cover that in this channel because, again, I'm very more tech-centric and more semiconductor-centric. I'm pretty sure there's other channels covering it. I just want to bring it up to your attention that this can also bring some volatility to maybe some of the popular stocks that you own right now. Now, the final thing I want to take a closer look at is this Friday, not this Friday, May 15th, we were supposed to have the AI diffusion rule. Now, the AI diffusion rule is gone, but there is something that's going to replace it eventually. I do believe that's going to be the case. And I am curious to see what we hear about this. We still have more important information to learn about kind of semiconductor, the national security research and investigation that's happening behind that. So the semiconductor market, even with obviously these trade tariffs and trade deals kind of getting a little easier, there's still a lot of reasons why this overall market can be very, very volatile. Now, this week is a interesting earnings week, but I think for semiconductor investors, there's not anything that can really kind of move stock prices, in my opinion. Maybe CoreWeave. You guys know I own this one. I'm very excited about this one. And I talked about it how I recently added just a few weeks ago. And I mentioned it, I've added a nice substantial amount. So I'm curious about that. I'll probably be doing a video on CoreWeave before they report earnings on Wednesday, and Applied Materials on Thursday after the market closes. Again, I don't think there's anything big in the tech space or in the semiconductor space, but I am going to be watching a few earnings here and there. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.